My father once told me I didn't have the stomach for real law, dismissing my practice as a hobby for those who couldn't survive the big leagues. Yet, 10 years later, the application sitting on my desk isn't a lawsuit or a threat. It is a surrender. Whitlock and Price, his elite firm, is formally asking to work under my name. They want to hide behind the reputation he spent a lifetime telling me was worthless. The mediation room smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne, a scent combination that always signaled a long afternoon in Harbor Falls. Across the mahogany table, the legal team for Ridley Development sat in a phalanx of navy blue suits, their postures rigid with the kind of confidence that usually cost $400 an hour. I sat opposite them, alone, my notepad resting on a scuffed laminate section of the table. My client, a terrified landscape architect named Ben, sat beside me. His hands were shaking beneath the table. He was being sued for breach of contract because the retaining wall he had designed for a Ridley luxury subdivision had cracked after the first heavy rain. Ridley was demanding $200,000 in damages. To a solo practitioner like Ben, that number wasn't just a debt, it was an execution. The lead attorney for Ridley, a man named Sterling who liked to hear his own baritone, leaned forward. "Ms. Carter, let us be reasonable," Sterling said, checking his watch for the third time. "Your client used substandard materials. The geological survey is clear. If we take this to trial, we will bury him. We are offering a walkaway settlement if he admits liability and surrenders his license. It is a gift." I looked at Ben. He was pale, ready to fold. He had spent 3 years building his reputation, and these men were about to dismantle it over a lunch break. I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was the specific, acidic burn of being underestimated. It was the same feeling I had 11 years ago, at a graduation dinner at the Harbor Club. When my father clinked his spoon against a crystal glass and announced to our table that I was going to practice happy law. He had laughed, a dry, sharp sound. He told everyone that I didn't have the killer instinct for high-stakes litigation. He called me a pretend lawyer. I pushed the memory down. I didn't need a killer instinct. I just needed to be able to read. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of an email chain I had found deep in the discovery dump, buried inside a folder labeled Miscellaneous Vendor Correspondence. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice steady. "Before we discuss surrendering licenses, I would like you to look at the timestamp on this email from your project manager to the concrete supplier." Sterling glanced at it dismissively, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. I continued. "The email is dated 3 weeks before my client even stepped onto the site. In it, your project manager explicitly declines the soil stabilization recommendation to save 15% on the budget. He writes, and I quote, 'Just pour it. If it cracks, we will blame the landscaper.'" The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a roar in the quiet. Sterling looked at the paper, then at his client, then at me. The arrogance drained out of his face, replaced by the grim calculation of damage control. "We are done here," I said, closing my notebook. "You will drop the suit, you will pay my client's legal fees, and you will issue a formal letter absolving him of all fault, or I will file this into the public record tomorrow morning." Sterling didn't argue. He didn't bluster. He just nodded. Once, tight and sharp. When we walked out of that building 20 minutes later, Ben looked at me like I was a magician. He tried to hug me, tears in his eyes, thanking me for saving his life. I smiled and told him to go home to his family, but as I walked back to my car, the victory felt complicated. I hadn't won because I was a shark. I had won because I did the work the sharks thought was beneath them. I drove my 10-year-old sedan back to Carter Legal Studio. My office was a converted brick row house in the Arts District, sandwiched between a bakery and a graphic design firm. It wasn't the glass tower my father ruled from, but it was mine. The sign out front was hand-painted gold leaf on black wood. Inside, the floors creaked, and the air always smelled faintly of yeast from next door. Lila Vale was waiting for me at the front desk. She was my operations partner, paralegal, and the person who kept my life from dissolving into chaos. She held up a coffee cup as a salute. "You look like you just slayed a dragon," Lila said. "I slayed a mid-level associate with a bad comb-over," I said, dropping my briefcase. "But I will take the win. Did the rent check clear?" "It did," she said, "but we have a weird one in the inbox. Flagged urgent." I walked into my office and woke up my computer. The screen glowed, illuminating the stacks of files that covered every surface. I specialized in employment and contract disputes for people the big firms ignored. Teachers, small business owners, freelancers. It was volume work, exhausting and low margin. But it let me sleep at night. I clicked on the email Lila had flagged. The subject line read, "Request for confidential meeting. Matter of strategic importance." I frowned. It sounded like spam or a scam from a distant prince. Then I saw the sender address. https://www.google.com/search?q=CW. HITLOCK.PRYCE. My stomach dropped. Whitlock and Price, the firm my father, Graham Carter, had built into a regional empire, the firm where he was a named partner, the firm where I was strictly not welcome there. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Carter, we request your presence at our offices tomorrow at 10 in the morning to discuss a matter of mutual professional interest. Please treat this correspondence as privileged. Sincerely, Celeste Whitlock, Managing Partner." I stared at the screen. Celeste Whitlock. She was a legend in Harbor Falls. A woman who had broken the glass ceiling by turning it into a guillotine. She had been my father's partner for 20 years. In all that time, she had never spoken a word to me. At company holiday parties, when I was a child, she would look through me as if I were a piece of misplaced furniture. "Why is Celeste Whitlock emailing me?" I asked, my voice sounding thin in the empty office. Lila leaned in the doorway. "Maybe they want to settle the Peters case?" I shook my head. "Whitlock doesn't settle with me. They bury me. And the Peters case is small claims court stuff. This is from the managing partner." I considered deleting it. I considered replying with a politely phrased refusal. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It pulls at you, especially when it wears the face of the people who rejected you. "I will go," I said, "but I'm wearing my armor." The next morning, I stood in the lobby of the Whitlock and Price building. It was a monolith of steel and tinted glass that loomed over the harbor. The lobby alone was larger than my entire office. The security guard checked my ID 3 times before buzzing me through the turnstile. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor made my ears pop. When the doors opened, I stepped onto plush carpet that silenced my heels. The air up here was different, scrubbed, chilled, and smelling of money. A receptionist with perfect posture led me to a conference room. The view from the window was breathtaking, a panoramic sweep of the city and the ocean beyond. It was the view of people who owned the world. The door opened, and Celeste Whitlock walked in. She was in her late 50s, elegant and terrifying, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my car. She didn't smile. "Audrey," she said, "thank you for coming on short notice." "Ms. Whitlock," I said, remaining standing. "Please, sit." She sat at the head of the table. I took the seat to her right. There were no pleasantries, no questions about how I had been or how my practice was. Celeste placed a thick, bound document on the table and slid it across the polished wood until it rested in front of me. The cover page read, "Application for Strategic Affiliation." I looked at the title, then up at her. "I don't understand. We have been watching your firm," Celeste said. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Carter Legal Studio has built a reputation for integrity. You handle the cases we cannot, and you do so with a moral clarity that is rare in this market." I waited. The compliment felt slimy, like oil on water. Whitlock and Price is looking to evolve. She continued. The legal landscape is shifting. Clients want authenticity. They want connection. We believe that by affiliating with your firm, operating under your umbrella for certain practice areas, we can capture a market segment we are currently missing. I almost laughed. It was a physical impulse I had to choke back. You want to affiliate with me? You want the white shoe firm of Whitlock and Price to operate under the banner of a storefront practice in the Arts District? We admire your ethics-forward model. Celeste said, It is a strategic pivot. I looked down at the document again. It was absurd. It was like a cruise ship asking to be towed by a rowboat. My father's firm had 300 attorneys. I had Lila and a part-time intern. Does my father know about this? I asked. Celeste's expression didn't flicker. Graham is aware of the proposal. He recused himself from the committee vote to avoid any appearance of nepotism. Of course. But he supports the initiative. Nepotism. The word hung in the air. My father had spent my entire life ensuring no one could ever accuse him of nepotism. He had gone out of his way to make sure I received no help, no introductions, no mentorship. He had wanted me to fail on my own merits so he wouldn't be responsible for my mediocrity. I flipped open the cover page. The executive summary was dense, filled with corporate buzzwords about synergy and vertical integration. But as I scanned the second paragraph, a sentence caught my eye. While the target firm has limited courtroom exposure, its community standing provides a valuable veneer of accessibility. I froze. Limited courtroom exposure. It was a specific phrase, not limited trial experience or small litigation footprint. Limited courtroom exposure. It was the exact phrase my father had used to describe my career over Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. He had said, Audrey, with your limited courtroom exposure, you really shouldn't opine on the federal bench. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a routing code. Prep, M, Rourke, /Rev, G, C. Who is Miles Rourke? I asked, pointing to the name in the routing line. Celeste blinked. A micro-reaction of surprise. A consultant. He assisted with the market analysis. I don't know him. I said, but he writes like he knows me. It is a standard assessment. Celeste said, her tone sharpening slightly. We are offering you a significant influx of capital. Audrey, we would provide infrastructure, back-office support, and a referral network. You would retain your title as principal. We simply want to align our brands. It sounded like they wanted to wear my skin. I need time to review this, I said, closing the folder. Of course. Celeste said. She stood up, signaling the meeting was over. We would like an answer by Friday. The market moves quickly. I took the heavy document and walked out. I felt eyes on my back until the elevator doors closed. In the safety of my car, parked 3 blocks away to avoid the valet fees. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling. I stared at the contact named Dad. We spoke perhaps 3 times a year, usually on birthdays and holidays. Conversations that were brief and filled with long, agonizing pauses. I pressed the call button. It rang 4 times. I expected voicemail. I hoped for voicemail. Carter, he answered. No hello, just his last name, as if he were answering a line in the war room. It's Audrey, I said. I know who it is. I have caller ID. Make it quick. I have a deposition in 10 minutes. I just left a meeting with Celeste. I said, she gave me the affiliation proposal. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. And? He asked. And? Dad, they want to put your firm under my name. They want to affiliate with me. It doesn't make any sense. You guys bill more in an hour than I bill in a month. Don't be dramatic, he said. His voice was cool, detached. It's a business strategy. The mid-market is expanding. We need a vehicle to access it without diluting our primary brand equity. Brand equity. I was a vehicle. The proposal says I have limited courtroom exposure. I said, that's your line. Did you write this? I told you. I recused myself. But you know about it. You're letting them do this. Audrey, listen to me. His voice dropped an octave. The tone he used when he was explaining simple concepts to difficult clients. You have been complaining for years that I never helped you, that I never took you seriously. Now, my firm is offering you a partnership that will legitimize your practice overnight. You should be saying thank you, instead of hunting for conspiracies. Legitimize my practice. The insult was so casual, he probably didn't even register it. It feels like a trap. I said. Don't get emotional, he snapped. This is business. If you can't tell the difference, then maybe you really aren't cut out for this. He hung up. I sat in the car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were wet. I hated myself for it. I was 33 years old. I had won cases against developers and insurance giants. I had built a life, but one sentence from him could still reduce me to a child seeking permission to exist. He was right about one thing. It was business. But he was wrong about the emotion. The emotion was the only thing telling me the truth. I drove back to the office in a daze. When I walked in, Lila was on the phone, wrestling with a printer repair service. She took one look at my face and hung up on them. What happened? She asked. Did they sue us? Worse, I said. I dropped the affiliation packet on her desk. They want to buy us. Well, not buy, occupy. Lila opened the folder. She read the first page, her eyebrows climbing higher with every line. Strategic affiliation? What does that even mean? It sounds like a parasite asking permission to enter. Exactly. I said. Lila flipped through the pages. Audrey, look at these numbers. They are projecting a revenue split that favors us for the first 2 years. That's insane. Big firms don't give away money. They don't apply to small firms unless they are bleeding. That's what I thought, I said. Lila kept turning pages. She stopped about halfway through. Hey, look at this. What? Pages 42 through 45. They are identical to pages 38 through 41. Same text, same charts. They just reprinted them to bulk it up. I leaned over her shoulder. She was right. The footer numbers were different. But the content was a duplicate. It looks hurried. I said, it looks sloppy. Lila corrected. Whitlock and Price isn't sloppy. They charge for typos. Why would they rush a merger document? I took the binder from her and flipped to the back, looking for the exhibits. The table of contents listed Schedules A through E. I found Schedule A, Financials, Schedule B, Staffing, Schedule C, Real Estate. Then I turned the page. Schedule E, Integration Timeline. Where is Schedule D? I asked. Lila looked. Missing? I checked the table of contents again. Schedule D, Pending Matters and Exposure. It wasn't there. There was no divider tab, no blank page. It simply skipped from C to E. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. Schedule D would be the list of all active lawsuits against the firm, all potential malpractice claims, all liabilities. It was the dirty laundry list. They left it out. I said, maybe it was an oversight, Lila suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. In a document this important? From a firm that prides itself on perfection? I shook my head. No. You don't forget the background check when you're applying for a job unless you have a criminal record you are trying to hide. I looked at the duplicate pages. The glossy cover. The vague language about ethics. They aren't trying to acquire us. Lila, I said, the realization forming like ice in my stomach. They are trying to hide inside us. That night, there was a mixer for the County Bar Association at a taproom downtown. Usually, I avoided these events. They were filled with posturing attorneys swapping war stories that grew more heroic with every drink. But tonight, I put on my best blazer and went. I needed to hear the gossip. The room was crowded. I navigated through the clusters of suits, holding a club soda with lime. I spotted Dave Miller and Sarah Jenkins near the bar. They were mid-level associates at another large firm in town. Davis Clark. We had gone to law school together. Audrey, Dave called out, waving me over. Long time no see. Heard you crushed the Ridley mediation. Sterling was crying in the elevator. Word travels fast, I said, forcing a smile. Sarah clinked her glass against mine. Good for you. Sterling is a nightmare. So, how is the solo life? It is busy, I said. I paused, keeping my tone casual. Actually, I had a weird run-in today. Got an email from Whitlock and Price. The reaction was instant and subtle. Dave's smile froze for a fraction of a second. Sarah looked down at her drink, suddenly very interested in the ice cubes. "Oh?" Dave said. His voice was too high. "What did they want?" "Just some referral stuff." I lied, but the vibe was strange. "Have you guys heard anything? Is everything okay over there?" Dave and Sarah exchanged a look. It was a quick, darting glance. The kind of look two people share when they know something they aren't supposed to talk about. "I mean, it is a big firm," Dave said, shifting his weight. "There are always rumors." "What kind of rumors?" I pressed. Sarah looked around the room, checking who was within earshot. "Just turnover. You know how it is. People get burned out." It felt like a deflection. Dave checked his watch. "Hey, we actually have to run. Early start tomorrow. Good seeing you." "Audrey?" They left quickly, disappearing into the crowd. They hadn't finished their drinks. I stood there, gripping my cold glass. They were afraid. Attorneys love to gossip about the misfortunes of their rivals. If Whitlock was just having a bad quarter, they would be gloating. But they weren't gloating. They were nervous. Whatever was happening inside my father's firm, it was radioactive, and they had just invited me to step right into the core of it. I walked out of the bar and into the cool night air. The streetlights reflected on the damp pavement. I thought about the applications sitting on my desk. I thought about my father's cold voice on the phone. "This is business." He was right. It was business. But he had made a critical error. He thought he was dealing with the daughter who sought his approval. He thought he was dealing with the pretend lawyer who would be grateful for the scraps from his table. He didn't realize he was dealing with someone who had spent 10 years learning how to spot a lie in the fine print. I wasn't going to sign that application. I was going to find Schedule D. And I was going to find out exactly what my father was so afraid of. The morning light in my office was usually something I loved. A soft, dusty gold that filtered through the high windows of the converted row house. But today, the light felt exposing. It illuminated the dust motes dancing over the stack of files on my desk. And more importantly, it illuminated the application for strategic affiliation that I had not yet thrown in the recycling bin. I had spent the last 48 hours swinging between flattered disbelief and paranoid suspicion. My father's voice on the phone, "Don't get emotional," was still ringing in my ears like a tinnitus I couldn't shake. If Graham Carter was telling me not to be emotional, it usually meant there was something he didn't want me to feel. Because feelings led to questions, and questions led to the kind of answers that ruined dinner parties. I needed facts. Emotion was a fog. Facts were the lighthouse. I started with the only concrete lead I had outside of the firm itself. The court system. The beauty of the American legal system is that it generates paper, mountains of it. Even when powerful people try to hide, they leave tracks in the metadata. I logged into the county clerk's public access portal. It was a clunky, archaic website that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. But I knew its quirks better than I knew the layout of my own apartment. I typed Whitlock and Price into the Council of Record field and filtered for active cases filed in the last 6 months. The list populated. Most of it was standard fare for a firm of their size. Corporate mergers, high-value probate, patent disputes, boring, profitable, safe. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning for anomalies, and then I saw it. Case number CV 202-5998, sealed, Plaintiff versus Northbridge Aerosystems. The plaintiff's name was redacted, sealed by court order, but the defense counsel was listed clearly. Graham Carter, Whitlock and Price, LLP, Northbridge Aerosystems. The name sounded familiar. They were a mid-sized defense contractor with a facility just outside the city limits. They made guidance components for drones or something equally expensive and technical. What caught my attention wasn't the client, but the docket history. The case had been filed only 3 months ago, but the activity log was frantic. Emergency motion to seal. Granted. Ex parte hearing. Held. Motion for expedited discovery. Granted. Emergency motion to quash subpoena. Denied. The timestamps were telling. These filings were happening late at night, on weekends. This wasn't a slow-moving contract dispute. This was a fire. Someone was scrambling to contain something massive, and the court was letting them keep the details in the dark. I stared at the screen. Emergency filings usually meant imminent harm or the potential for destruction of evidence. Why was my father personally handling a sealed case for a defense contractor while simultaneously trying to merge his firm with mine? My internal phone line buzzed, snapping me out of the trance. I picked up. "Audrey," Lila said, her voice low. "We have a walk-in." "Well, a call-in who wants to be a walk-in, but not here." "Who is it?" I asked. "Her name is Jessa Marlin. She says she is a paralegal, formerly with Whitlock and Price." My hand tightened on the receiver. Did she say what she wants? She said she has a personal legal matter regarding an employment agreement. But she insisted on meeting away from the office. She suggested that coffee shop on 4th, the one with the bad acoustics, the noisy one. I said, "Where no one can overhear you." "Exactly," Lila said. "She sounds jumpy." "Audrey, like looking over her shoulder jumpy. Tell her I can be there in 20 minutes. I grabbed my coat. This was it. The crack in the facade. The coffee shop was crowded. The air thick with the smell of roasted beans and the roar of the espresso machine. It was the perfect place to have a conversation you didn't want recorded. I spotted Jessa Marlin immediately. She was sitting in a booth in the back corner, wearing a beige trench coat that she hadn't unbuttoned. She looked young, maybe 25, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup hadn't been able to hide. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup as if it were a source of warmth in a blizzard. I slid into the booth opposite her. "Jessa? I am Audrey Carter." She looked up, startled. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "Ms. Carter, thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to call. You said you have an employment issue?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Jessa nodded, but she didn't speak immediately. She took a sip of her coffee, her hand trembling slightly. "I worked at Whitlock and Price for 3 years," she said, "in the litigation support department. I quit 2 days ago. Why did you quit?" "Jessa?" She looked down at the table. They asked me to sign a non-disclosure agreement that felt expansive, and then they asked me to verify an index of files for the Northbridge matter. I kept my face neutral, though the name sent a jolt through me. Northbridge. "What was wrong with the index?" I asked. "It didn't match the physical boxes," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There were gaps." When I asked the senior associate about it, he told me that the index was for the external review and that the missing files were non-responsive and had been moved to off-site storage. "But Ms. Carter, I packed those boxes originally. The missing files weren't non-responsive. They were the primary communication logs between the client and the engineering lead." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for me to understand without her having to say the words, "obstruction of justice." "I call it document pressure," she said. The air got heavy. Everyone was walking around like they were holding their breath. People started leaving, not the partners, but the support staff, the ones who actually touched the paper. We were being asked to clean up files, not organize them, clean them. I leaned forward. "Jessa, did anyone explicitly tell you to destroy evidence?" "No," she said quickly. "They are too smart for that. They just use words like curate and streamline, but I know what I saw. And when I gave my notice, they threatened to withhold my accrued vacation pay if I didn't sign a new confidentiality deed. That is why I called you. Can they do that?" "Technically, it depends on your original contract," I said, "but practically, they are trying to scare you into silence." Jessa let out a shaky breath. "It worked. I am scared. Everyone says your father is untouchable." I looked at this young woman, terrified of the man who had raised me. It was a strange dissonance. To me, Graham Carter was a distant, critical figure, but to her, he was a titan who could crush her career with a phone call. "I will take your case. Jessa," I said, "we will send them a letter regarding your vacation pay, and we will remind them that any attempt to intimidate a former employee who may be a witness in a pending matter is a violation of the ethics code." She looked relieved, her shoulders dropping an inch. You aren't afraid of them? I smiled, though it felt tight. I have been dealing with Graham Carter since I was born. His bark is worse than his bite. Usually. I left the coffee shop with a new understanding of the strategic affiliation. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't a business pivot. It was a shelter. Whitlock and Price was a sinking ship. They were taking on water, bad water, toxic water, and they needed a lifeboat. My firm, with its squeaky clean reputation and its ethics-forward model, was the perfect vessel. They didn't want to partner with me. They wanted to wear my reputation like a clean suit over their dirty clothes. When I got back to the office, Lila was waiting for me with a stack of financial printouts. She looked grim. "How was the Deep Throat meeting?" she asked, confirming my worst suspicions. I said, "They are purging files, or at least, hiding them. What do you have?" I did a deep dive on their financial standing. Lila said, "I pulled their UCC filings, just to see who holds their debt. And it is ugly. Audrey, look at this." She spread a document on my desk. It was a UCC-1 financing statement filed 3 weeks ago. The secured party was Greystone Capital Bridge. I don't know them. I said, "You wouldn't." Lila said, "They aren't a bank. They are a private equity lender of last resort. They specialize in distressed assets. Look at the collateral." I read the line she was pointing to. "All accounts receivable, present and future, and all equipment, fixtures, and intellectual property. They mortgaged the furniture?" I asked, stunned. "Audrey," Lila said, her voice serious, "the interest rate on these bridge loans is usually north of 12%. A firm like Whitlock and Price, a firm that charges $800 an hour, doesn't go to a place like Greystone unless every legitimate bank in the city has already said no." "They are broke," I whispered, "or they are facing a liquidity crisis so massive they need cash immediately to plug a hole," Lila said. It all fit. The rush, the sloppy application, the flattery. They needed to move their assets, and their liabilities, under a new corporate structure before the old one collapsed. If they affiliated with me, they could claim that Whitlock and Price was restructuring, transfer the clean assets to the new entity, and leave the toxic waste behind in the shell of the old firm. Or worse, bring the toxic waste with them and let it contaminate me. "I need to see Celeste again," I said, and this time I am not going to be polite. I scheduled the meeting for the following afternoon. I didn't ask. I told Celeste's assistant that I was coming to finalize my review of the materials. When I walked into the conference room, Celeste was waiting. She looked as composed as ever, but I noticed a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. There were no pleasantries this time. "Audrey," she said, "I trust you have had time to review the proposal?" "I have," I said, remaining standing. "I have a few questions. Please," she said, gesturing to a chair. I didn't sit. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I noticed that Schedule D was missing from the packet. I said, turning to face her. Celeste didn't blink. "Ah, yes, the disclosure schedule. We are currently updating it to reflect the most recent quarterly filings. It is a dynamic document. I want to see it. Celeste, I cannot consider an affiliation without knowing your pending exposure." She smiled, a thin, patronizing expression. "Audrey, surely you understand that Schedule D contains highly sensitive client information. We cannot simply hand it over to an outside party, even a prospective partner, without a formal commitment." "A commitment?" I asked. "A letter of intent." She said, "Once we formalize our mutual intent to move forward, we will open the full data room to you. It is standard due diligence procedure." I stared at her. She was good. She was making it sound like I was the amateur for asking. But I heard the translation loud and clear. "Sign the trap, and then we will show you the spikes. I am not signing a letter of intent without seeing the liabilities." I said, "And I know about the Greystone loan." "Celeste," her eyes hardened, "that is a strategic bridge facility for capital improvements. It is a payday loan for a law firm." I said, "And I know about Northbridge." The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, I thought she might call security. The mask slipped, just for a second, revealing a flash of genuine fear. "Northbridge is a sealed matter," she said, her voice ice cold. "If you are accessing sealed records, Audrey, you are treading on dangerous ethical ground." "I accessed the public docket," I said. "It is public record that you have a sealed case with emergency filings. That is not a breach, but hiding it from a potential partner? That is fraud." Celeste stood up. She was tall, imposing. "You are confused. Audrey, we are offering you the opportunity of a lifetime. Your father built this firm from nothing. He wants you to be part of its future. Do not let your unresolved issues with him cloud your judgment." It always came back to that. My issues, my emotions. "I want Schedule D by tomorrow morning," I said, "or the answer is no." I walked out. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had just threatened the managing partner of the most powerful firm in the city. I felt nauseous. I felt alive. I needed air. I decided to walk to the courthouse to file the appearance form for Jess's case myself, just to have a reason to move. The harbor wind was whipping off the water, cold and biting. I was walking up the courthouse steps, head down against the wind, when I almost collided with a man coming down. "Excuse me," I muttered, sidestepping. "Audrey." I froze. The voice was gravel and smoke. I looked up. Graham Carter stood on the step above me. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat that looked heavy. He looked diminished. My father was a man who had always taken up space. He radiated a force field of authority, but today, in the gray light of the afternoon, he looked older than I remembered. His hair was fully white now, thinning at the temples. There were deep lines etched around his mouth, lines of exhaustion that no amount of sleep could erase. "Dad," I said. He didn't move. He just looked at me, studying my face as if he were trying to remember where he had seen me before. He was holding his briefcase in a white-knuckled grip. "I heard you met with Celeste," he said. "I did. She says you are being difficult. I am being thorough." I said, "There is a difference." He let out a short, dry sound that might have been a laugh. "Thorough. Yes, you always were." He looked past me, toward the skyline where his office tower stood. "You should take the deal." "Audrey," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "Why do you want this? You spent 10 years telling me I wasn't good enough for your firm. Now you want to merge with me? Why?" He looked back at me. His eyes were gray, like the harbor water. "Because the world is changing," he said. "And you have built something that can stand up in the wind." It was the closest thing to a compliment he had ever given me, and it terrified me. "You are in trouble, aren't you?" I asked. "The Northbridge case, the loan." He stiffened. His face closed up, the professional mask slamming back into place. "You have been busy," he said. It wasn't an answer. It was a deflection. But the tone was strange. It sounded like pride trying to disguise itself as critique. "I am just trying to survive. Dad, just like you taught me." He looked at me for one long, agonizing moment. Then he nodded. "Once, be careful." "Audrey," he said. He walked past me, down the steps, disappearing into the stream of people on the sidewalk. I stood there, shivering, watching him go. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't yelled. He had just warned me. That night, I drove to my mother's house in the suburbs. Renee Carter lived in a sprawling colonial that was too big for one person. It was a museum of a marriage that had effectively ended 20 years ago. Even though they had never divorced, she had made roast chicken. It was my comfort food. We sat at the kitchen island, the house quiet around us. "I saw him today," I said, picking at my food. "Your father?" Renee asked. She poured me a glass of wine. "How did he look?" "Tired," I said. "Old?" She sighed, a sound that seemed to come from the marrow of her bones. "He is under a lot of pressure. Audrey, the firm, it is his whole life. He wants me to save it." "Mom, that is what this application is. He wants me to catch him when he falls. Renee reached across the counter and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm. Would that be so bad? She asked softly. I looked at her, shocked. Mom, he tormented me. He belittled me. He told me I was a failure. I know, she said. I know, honey, and I hated him for it. But he is still your father. She squeezed my hand. Audrey, listen to me. You have won. You built your own firm. You proved him wrong. Now he is coming to you, hat in hand, asking for help. Take the win. Make peace. If you help him now, you heal the wound. You get the apology you have been waiting for. Even if he never says the words. I pulled my hand away. It is not that simple. Mom, there are ethics involved. There are laws. If I help him hide something illegal, I go down with him. She looked at me with sad, tired eyes. She wasn't naive. She knew who he was. She had just spent 30 years absorbing his emotional weather so that the rest of us wouldn't drown in it. She wanted peace so badly, she was willing to mistake compromise for healing. Just think about it, she said. Please, for me. I drove home with a knot in my stomach. My mother wanted me to be the bigger person. My father wanted me to be the useful person. Neither of them seemed to care about whether I was the safe person. Back at my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my living room floor with the affiliation packet spread out around me. I went through it again, page by page, looking for anything I had missed. Lila was right about the duplicate pages. It was sloppy. But as I turned the back cover over, something fell out. It was a small slip of paper, unlined, about the size of an index card. It must have been tucked into the very back pocket of the binder. Behind the glossy marketing brochures, I picked it up. There was no letterhead, no signature, just 2 sentences written in blue ink. If you accept, do it with your eyes open. They're not coming to join you. They're coming to hide behind you. My breath hitched. I knew that handwriting. The sharp, angular T, the way the Y looped at the bottom, cutting through the line below it. It was my father's handwriting. I stared at the note, my hands beginning to shake. He had approved the application. He was the one pushing for the affiliation. He had told me on the steps of the courthouse to take the deal. But he had written this note. They're coming to hide behind you. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. He was warning me against his own partners. He was warning me against the very deal he was publicly supporting. Why? Was he playing a double game? Was he trying to save me? Or was he trying to use me to destroy his partners? Or was this his twisted way of testing me, to see if I was smart enough to spot the trap he had set? I looked at the note again. Do it with your eyes open. He didn't say, don't do it. He said, do it with your eyes open. He wanted me to take the deal, but he wanted me to know that I was walking into a war zone. I put the note down on the coffee table. The city lights blinked outside my window, indifferent and cold. I realized then that the application wasn't just a business contract, it was a chessboard, and my father had just handed me the first piece of real intelligence I had. He was scared. Graham Carter, the man who never flinched, was scared of something inside his own firm, and he needed me, not as a daughter, not as a subordinate, but as an ally. I picked up my phone and texted Lila, get the engagement letter ready for Jessa, and find me everything you can on Northbridge. We are going to war. I wasn't just going to review the application, I was going to leverage it. If they wanted to hide behind me, they were going to have to pay the rent. And the currency wasn't going to be money, it was going to be the truth. Mara Keene practiced law out of a converted carriage house in the historic district. A space that smelled of old cedar and expensive, unscented candles. She was the ethics council attorneys hired when they were staring into the abyss of disbarment and needed someone to tell them exactly how deep the drop was. She didn't litigate, she diagnosed. I sat in her leather armchair, the affiliation binder resting on the table between us like an unexploded ordnance. Mara flipped through the pages with a speed that suggested she had seen every variation of corporate desperation before. She was 60, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that magnified the skepticism in her eyes. She stopped on the page detailing the integrated management structure. She read it, then closed the binder and took off her glasses. "Audrey," she said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am listening." I said, "This is not a partnership proposal," she said. Her voice was dry, devoid of any comforting cadence. "This is a liability transfer wearing perfume." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I suspected it, but hearing Mara say it made it real. "Explain it to me," I said. Mara tapped the binder with a manicured fingernail. "Look at the indemnity clauses on page 52. They are unilateral. If the new entity, the one under your name, assumes the legacy operations of Whitlock and Price, you are effectively agreeing to ensure their past conduct. They are not asking you to join them. They are asking you to become the retroactive insurer for every mistake they have made in the last 5 years. She leaned back. Why would they do this? Why would a firm with their revenue stream want to hide under the banner of a boutique solo practice? Because they are in trouble. I said, I told her about the Greystone loan. I told her about the missing Schedule D. Mara nodded slowly. It fits. They are trying to firewall their assets. They move the money and the clients to the new entity, your entity, and leave the malpractice claims and the debt in the old shell company. When the lawsuits hit, the old shell declares bankruptcy, and the partners walk away clean, operating safely under the umbrella of Carter Legal Studio. And what happens to me? I asked. You become the face of the new firm, Mara said, which means when the creditors and the disciplinary board come looking for the assets, they come to your door. You are the human shield. I stared at the binder. My father had sent this. He had approved it. Is it legal? I asked. Technically? Maybe, if the disclosures are perfect, but morally? It is predation. Mara looked at me with a softness I rarely saw. Your father is a named partner. He knows what this is. He warned me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I told her about the note. Do it with your eyes open. Then he knows the ship is going down. Mara said, and he is trying to throw you a life vest that might actually be an anchor. Do not sign this, Audrey, not until you know exactly what is in the water. I left Mara's office with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. I needed to find the source. I needed to find Miles Rourke. The contact information in the binder for Miles Rourke, consultant, led to a generic email address. I had sent a message 2 days ago, asking for a meeting to discuss market synergy. To my surprise, he had replied within an hour, agreeing to meet at the Hive, a co-working space in the tech corridor. The Hive was a cavernous warehouse filled with long communal tables, exposed ductwork, and 20-year-olds coding in noise-canceling headphones. It was the last place I expected to find a consultant for a white shoe law firm. I bought a black coffee and waited near the entrance. At 10 o'clock exactly, a man walked in. He wasn't what I expected. I was looking for a slick corporate strategist in a slim-fit suit. The man who approached me was wearing a faded polo shirt and corduroys that had seen better decades. He carried a battered messenger bag. Audrey Carter? He asked. I nodded. Miles Rourke? He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. His face was lined, weathered by something harder than sun. He looked familiar in a way I couldn't place, like a face from a half-remembered dream. Let's find a corner, he said. We sat at a small round table away from the main hub. He put his bag down and looked at me. You don't recognize me, do you? He asked. I studied him, the jawline, the way he held his head. Then, it clicked. A memory from my childhood, a summer barbecue at my parents' house, my father standing next to a young, brilliant associate, clapping him on the back, calling him the future of the firm. You are Miles Rourke, I said slowly. You were a junior partner. 15 years ago, 18 years ago. He corrected. I was the heir apparent. Until I wasn't. I remember. I said, you vanished. Dad said you went into venture capital. Miles laughed. A harsh barking sound. Graham always was good at rewriting history. I didn't go into venture capital. I went into rehab, and then I went into teaching. I haven't practiced law in a decade. Then why is your name on this application? I asked. Why are you the lead consultant? I am not the consultant. Audrey, I am the ghost. He leaned in, lowering his voice. 3 months ago, Celeste Whitlock called me. She offered me $10,000 to use my name on a market analysis for a merger. She said they needed an outside party to validate the valuation, but they didn't want to hire a big accounting firm because it would trigger rumors. She said since I was still technically listed on some legacy insurance paperwork, it would be seamless. And you agreed? I need the money, he said simply. Teachers don't make what partners make. I signed the paper. I didn't write the report. I never even saw the application until you emailed me. I felt a surge of anger. They used you, just like they are trying to use me. Miles shrugged. We are all resources to them. Audrey, you know that. Why are they doing this? Miles? I asked. What is the emergency? He looked around the room. Ensuring no one was listening. It is not just financial, he said. It is regulatory. A disciplinary audit is coming. An audit? A whistleblower complaint was filed with the state bar. He said, someone inside the firm reported systemic ethical violations. I don't know the details, but I still have friends in the clerk's office. The bar is assembling a special investigative committee. Whitlock and Price is scrambling to restructure before the subpoenas hit. If they can show they have reformed under new leadership, your leadership, they might be able to negotiate a settlement instead of a disbarment. They want me to be the patsy. I said, they want you to be the firewall. He corrected. If the firm collapses, it collapses on your head. If it survives, they take the credit. I looked at this man, this ghost of my father's past. He had been the golden boy once. Now he was a cautionary tale sitting in a co-working space, selling his name for 10 grand. Does my father know? I asked. Miles looked at me with pity. Audrey, your father is the one who called me to finalize the payment. I drove back to my office in silence. The radio was off. The city noise was muffled by the glass, but the noise in my head was deafening. My first instinct was a hot, sharp desire for revenge. I imagined walking into my father's office, throwing the binder on his desk, and screaming. I know. I imagined the look on his face when I told him that I wasn't the fool he thought I was. I imagined saying, now you need me. There was a dark, seductive pleasure in that thought, to finally hold the power, to finally be the one deciding his fate. But beneath the anger, there was a sickening undertow of grief. I hated myself for enjoying the thought of his failure. I hated that even now, even when he was trying to sacrifice me to save his own skin. I was still defining myself in relation to him. I was still the daughter waiting for him to look at me. If I saved him, I was a victim. If I destroyed him, I was a monster. There was no winning move. When I walked into the office, Jessa Marlin was sitting in the reception area. She looked paler than she had at the coffee shop. She was clutching a manila envelope. Audrey, she said, standing up. I found something else. Come in, I said. We went into my office. I closed the door and blinds. Jessa placed the envelope on my desk. I still have access to my old email archive on my phone. She said, they haven't wiped my remote login yet. I searched for Northbridge. And I found this. She pulled out a printout of an email chain. It was dated 4 months ago. The subject line was innocuous. Timeline verification. Project N. The email was from Grant Price, the other named partner. It was addressed to 3 senior associates and my father. It read, the client's recollection of the safety inspection date does not align with the current documentation. We need to refresh the file. Please review the metadata on the inspection logs and ensure the timeline reflects a completion date of January 15th, not February 1st. The client is certain the inspection happened in January. The record should match the client's certainty. I read it twice. Refresh the file. The record should match the client's certainty. It was careful language. A lawyer could argue in court that they were simply correcting a clerical error. But in the context of a sealed case involving a defense contractor, it was an instruction to backdate a document. It was forgery. Who is copied on this? I asked. Jessa pointed to the CC line. Graham Carter? Did he reply? No, she said, But he didn't object. And the next email in the chain is from an associate attaching the revised inspection log with the January date. I felt a heavy stone settle in my chest. Silence was consent. My father hadn't written the order, but he had watched it happen. He had let it happen. "Thank you, Jessa," I said. "This is vital." "Is it enough to stop them?" she asked. "It is enough to bury them," I said. After Jessa left, I sat with the email. This was the smoking gun. This was the reason for the panic. The loan. The affiliation. They had falsified safety records for a government contractor. If this came out, it wasn't just malpractice. It was criminal fraud. People could go to prison. My father could go to prison. I needed to think. I needed to focus on my own firm. I picked up a file from the stack on my desk, trying to distract myself with routine work. It was the file for Soren Pike. Soren was a young tech founder, brilliant and chaotic. I was representing him in a contract dispute regarding the intellectual property of his startup. He had developed a new type of compression software for drone video feeds. I froze. Drone video feeds. I flipped through Soren's file. I looked at his employment history. Before he founded his startup, he had been a lead engineer at a large aerospace company. I turned the page. Employer: Northbridge Aerosystems. My blood ran cold. Soren Pike was a former employee of Northbridge. His technology was derived from work he had done there, and Northbridge was the client Whitlock and Price was currently protecting with forged documents. If I affiliated with Whitlock and Price, I would effectively be partnering with Northbridge's counsel. I would have a direct conflict of interest. I would have to drop Soren. Soren, who trusted me. Soren, who couldn't afford a big firm. Soren, whose entire livelihood depended on me winning this case against his former employer. The affiliation wasn't just about me absorbing their liability, it was about me betraying my own clients to protect theirs. I stood up. The chair fell back against the wall with a crash. Enough. I grabbed the email printout, the UCC filing, and the affiliation binder. I didn't call ahead. I walked out of my office, got into my car, and drove straight to the Whitlock and Price Tower. The receptionist tried to stop me. I walked past her. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. I walked past the assistants who stood up to intercept me. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the main conference room. Celeste Whitlock was there, meeting with 2 junior partners. They looked up, startled. "Audrey?" Celeste said, her voice sharp. "You cannot just barge in here." I slammed the binder on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Get out," I said to the junior partners. They looked at Celeste. "Leave us," she said tightly. They gathered their papers and fled. The door clicked shut. "I am done playing games. Celeste," I said, "I know about the Greystone loan. I know about the whistleblower. I know about the audit. And I know about the backdated inspection logs for Northbridge." Celeste's face went rigid. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a marble statue. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked its usual steel. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I have the emails. Celeste, refresh the file. You are forging documents for a defense contractor. And now you want to merge with me so you can hide the evidence in my archives and pretend it is a legacy issue when the investigators show up." Celeste stood slowly. She walked to the other end of the table, putting distance between us. "You have no idea of the scale of this," she said quietly. "I know enough." I said, "I know you are trying to make me drop my client, Soren Pike, because his claims against Northbridge would expose your fraud. I know you are trying to turn my firm into a dumping ground for your crimes." Celeste laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Crimes? We are protecting the firm. Audrey, we are protecting 500 jobs. If Northbridge goes down, we lose our biggest retainer. If we lose that, the bank calls the credit line. If the credit line is called, the firm dissolves. Do you want to see 500 people unemployed because of a paperwork error? It is not a paperwork error," I shouted. "It is lying, and you are trying to make me a co-conspirator." Celeste leaned forward. her hands flat on the table. "Listen to me. Little girl, you have a choice. You can stand on your high horse and preach about ethics while you file lawsuits for slip and falls. Or you can step up and save your family's legacy." "My family's legacy?" I asked, incredulous. "You mean my father's lies?" "I mean your father's life," she hissed. "If this audit goes the wrong way, Graham doesn't just lose his license, he loses everything. His pension, his reputation, his home. He is 65 years old. Audrey, do you want to be the one who pushes him off the ledge?" I stared at her. "You can either be part of the solution," Celeste said, her voice dropping to a velvet threat, "or you can watch your father's legacy collapse in public, and everyone will know that his own daughter had the chance to save him and chose to walk away." The words landed like a knife in my gut. She was using my love for him, the twisted, painful, unrequited love I'd been carrying for 30 years, as a weapon. She knew I didn't want him to be destroyed. She knew that despite everything, I still wanted him to be the hero. I felt nauseated, not from fear of her, or the law, or the audit, but from the realization of what my father had built. He hadn't just built a law firm, he had built a system where truth was negotiable, where people were disposable, and where his own daughter was just another asset to be leveraged. I looked at Celeste. I saw the desperation behind her eyes. She wasn't strong, she was terrified. "I am not your solution, Celeste," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "And I am not your shield." I turned and walked out. I didn't go back to the office. I couldn't face Lila or the files, or the reality of the decision I had to make. I drove home, to my small apartment with its view of the alleyway. I walked inside and locked the door. I went to the closet and pulled down a plastic storage bin from the top shelf. It was marked Law School. I sat on the floor and opened it. It was full of old textbooks, highlighters that had long since dried out, and a stack of letters tied with a rubber band. These were the letters I had written to my father during my first year of law school. I had written them late at night. In the library, when the pressure felt like it was crushing my skull, I had written about my fears, my triumphs, the cases that fascinated me. I had poured my heart out to him, hoping to connect with him in the only language he spoke. I had never sent them. I knew, even then, that he wouldn't read them, or worse, that he would read them and edit them with a red pen. I pulled out one letter from the middle of the stack. The paper was yellowing. I unfolded it. "Dear Dad," it began. "I won the moot court competition today. The judge said my closing argument was piercing. I thought you would be proud. But then I remembered what you said at Christmas, that moot court is just play acting for children. I realized something today. I don't need you to love me. I need you to stop rewriting me as a disappointment. I am good at this. And one day, I am going to be a real lawyer, not the kind you are, but the kind I want to be." I stared at the sentence. "I need you to stop rewriting me as a disappointment." I had been living inside that sentence for a decade. Every case I won, every client I saved, every long night I worked, it was all an argument against his narrative. I was trying to prove I was real. And now, he was finally admitting I was real, but only because he needed me to be fake. He needed me to lie for him. He needed me to be a real lawyer in the way he defined it. Someone who could bend the truth until it broke. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. I wasn't going to let him do it. I wasn't going to let him rewrite the ending of my story. I put the letter back in the box. I stood up. The nausea was gone. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. I knew what I had to do. I had to meet with Kira Donnelly. I had to find the whistleblower, and I had to decide if I was willing to burn down the house to save the people inside it. The phone rang in my pocket. It was Lila. "Audrey," she said, "you need to come back to the office. Now." "What is it?" "We just got a courier package," she said. "It was left at the back door. No return address. Open it," I said. "I did," she said. "Audrey, it is Schedule D." My heart stopped. "And?" I asked. "And it is worse than we thought." Lila whispered, It is not just Northbridge. Audrey, your father's initials are next to every single entry. I closed my eyes. He wasn't just a bystander. He was the architect. I will be there in 10 minutes. I said. I grabbed my keys. The time for letters was over. The time for evidence had begun. The rain in Harbor Falls had a way of making the city look like a watercolor painting left out in the damp, blurred edges, gray streaks, and a pervasive sense of melancholy. I sat in my car outside a small independent bookstore in the University District, watching the rain streak the windshield. I wasn't here for books. I was here for the person stocking the shelves inside, Kira Donnelly. 2 years ago, Kira had been my intern. She was sharp, eager, and possessed a moral compass that pointed so true north it sometimes made navigating the gray areas of law difficult for her. I had mentored her, written her recommendations, and watched with a mix of pride and sadness when she accepted a junior associate offer at Whitlock and Price. It was the smart career move. 6 months later, she had quit. Not just the firm, but the profession. She had ghosted everyone, including me. I had assumed she burned out. The hours at Whitlock and Price were notorious. 80-hour weeks were the baseline, but after my conversation with Miles Rourke about a whistleblower, my mind had gone back to Kira. She was the only person I knew inside that fortress who might have had the courage or the naivety to speak up. I checked my phone. I had scrolled back through our old text thread. Her last message to me, sent at 3 a.m. on the day she resigned, was just 4 words. I could not breathe there. I opened the car door and made a run for the awning. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. The smell of old paper and coffee was comforting. A stark contrast to the sterile ozone smell of a law firm. Kira was near the biography section, shelving hardcovers. She wore a chunky knit sweater and jeans. She looked younger than I remembered, softer. When she saw me, she froze. A book slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. "Audrey," she breathed. I picked up the book and handed it to her. "Hello, Kira. Are you here to serve me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said gently. "I am here to buy you a coffee and to ask you why you really left." We sat in the small cafe at the back of the store. Kira held her mug with both hands, staring into the dark liquid. She didn't look like a whistleblower. She looked like someone recovering from a long illness. "I know about the audit, Kira," I said softly. "I know someone filed a complaint." Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, filled with panic. "I didn't name names," she whispered. "I was careful. I couldn't do it. Audrey, I couldn't sign it." "Sign what? The affidavit?" She took a shaky breath. "I was working on the Northbridge discovery," she said. "The partner in charge of the document review called me into his office. He had an affidavit prepared for me. It stated that I had personally verified the chain of custody for a box of safety logs and that they had been in continuous secure storage since 2022. "But they hadn't been?" I asked. Kira shook her head violently. "The box had been in a partner's trunk for 6 months. I saw the intake labels. They were dated last week, but the logs inside were dated 3 years ago. If I signed that affidavit, I would be swearing to a timeline that was physically impossible. So you refused." "I tried to ask questions first," she said. "I asked if there was a mistake with the labels. The partner, he didn't yell. That would have been easier. He just looked at me like I was a disappointed parent. He said, 'Kira, we need team players. We need people who understand the bigger picture. Are you a literalist or are you a lawyer?' A literalist or a lawyer. It was the kind of binary manipulation my father's firm excelled at. I told him I couldn't sign it. Kira said, 'He told me to take the rest of the day off to think about my future.' I went to my desk, packed my things, and walked out. I filed the complaint with the Bar Association the next morning. Anonymous. She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't do it to be a hero. Audrey, I didn't want to bring them down. My stomach hurt, physically hurt. I knew if I signed that paper, I would never be able to look in a mirror again. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing, Kira." You were the only real lawyer in the room. But they are going to figure it out, she said, if they haven't already. And now? I heard rumors. I heard they are merging with you. I stiffened. Where did you hear that? Legal gossip blogs. They are saying Whitlock and Price is strategically pivoting to a boutique model. Audrey, please tell me you aren't doing it. Please tell me you aren't letting them in. They are trying, I said grimly, if you let them in. Kira said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They will infect you. It is not just the partners. It is the culture. It is the idea that the truth is just a first draft you can edit later. I left the bookstore with Kira's words ringing in my ears. The truth is just a first draft. I drove back to the office with a new resolve. I wasn't just reviewing an application anymore. I was negotiating a surrender. If they wanted to affiliate with me, if they wanted to use my name as a shield, they were going to have to pay a price so high it would bleed them white. I sat at my desk and opened a new file. I labeled it Decision File. I started typing. These weren't standard merger terms. These were demands. Condition 1. Full and immediate disclosure of all pending disciplinary matters, including the unredacted whistleblower complaint. Condition 2. Independent forensic audit of all client trust accounts and discovery logs for the past 5 years, conducted by an auditor of my choosing. Condition 3. Immediate resignation of any partner found to be complicit in document manipulation. Condition 4. A public statement acknowledging procedural deficiencies and accepting full liability for past conduct. I typed with a fury that felt like heat in my fingertips. I was crafting a poison pill. I wanted to present them with a document so insulting, so draconian, that they would have no choice but to walk away. Or, if they were truly desperate enough to sign it, I would have the power to clean house. Lila walked in while I was typing. She stood behind me and read the screen. Condition 4 is brutal, she said. They will never sign a public confession. It is suicide. That is the point, I said, not looking up. I want to see how scared they really are. If they agree to this, then the rot is even deeper than we think. Lila sat on the edge of my desk. Her expression was serious. Audrey, play this out with me. Let us say they sign it. Let us say they give you the keys to the kingdom. You fire the bad actors. You settle the Northbridge case. You become the managing partner of the new, reformed Carter Whitlock firm. That sounds like a victory. I said, Is it? Lila asked. Because the headline won't be Audrey Carter cleans up corruption. The headline will be Carter Legal absorbs scandal-plagued firm. Your name will be next to theirs. Forever. I stopped typing. People don't read the fine print. Audrey. Lila continued. They just see the logo. If you affiliate, half the town will think you saved them because you are a saint. The other half will think you saved them because you are your father's daughter. And this was the plan all along. You will lose your independence. You will be part of the dynasty. I looked at the screen. The dynasty. The thing I had spent my entire adult life running away from. I can't let them get away with it. Lila, if I walk away, they might find another way to bury this. They might destroy Kira. They might ruin Soren Pike. I have the leverage right now. I have to use it. Just make sure you know what you are buying. Lila said quietly. You are not just buying a law firm. You are buying your father's baggage, and that is heavy. That evening, I went to my mother's house again. I needed to be in a place that felt like neutral ground. Even if it wasn't. Renee was in the garden. Despite the damp chill, deadheading the roses, she believed in cutting away the dead parts to let the new growth survive. It was a metaphor she lived by, perhaps too strictly. I stood on the patio, holding 2 mugs of tea. Mom, I said, I need to ask you something about Dad. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. What is it? Do you remember when I applied for the clerkship with Judge Holloway? The summer after my 2nd year? Renee froze. Her back was to me. But I saw her shoulders tense. I remember. She said, You were heartbroken when you didn't get it. I was top of my class in legal writing. I said, I had a recommendation from the dean. Holloway had practically promised me the spot during the interview, and then, 2 days later, I got a rejection letter that was 2 sentences long. I never understood why. Renee turned around. She took the tea from me, but she didn't drink it. She looked at the steam rising into the cold air. Audrey, that was a long time ago. I know. Mom, but I need to know. Did Dad make a call? She looked at me, and I saw the struggle in her face, the loyalty to her husband warring with the love for her daughter. He didn't do it to hurt you, she said softly. The words were a physical blow. He didn't do it to hurt you, which meant he had done it. What did he say? I asked, my voice shaking. What did he say to Judge Holloway? Renee sighed. He told Holloway that you were brilliant. He really did, but he said you were emotionally reactive. He said the pressure of Holloway's chambers, you know how abusive that man could be, would break you. He told Holloway he was doing it as a favor to you, to keep you from burning out before you even started. I felt the blood drain from my face. He told a federal judge I was emotionally reactive? I whispered, Mom, that is a death sentence for a clerkship. He branded me as unstable. He thought he was protecting you, Renee insisted, stepping closer. He knew Holloway made clerks cry. He didn't want you to be eaten alive. So he ate me himself? I snapped. He sabotaged my career to protect me? Do you have any idea how hard I had to work to overcome that reputation? Holloway talks, Mom. He told people I was fragile. I spent 5 years proving I wasn't made of glass because of one phone call Dad made. Audrey, please. No wonder he calls me a pretend lawyer, I said, tears of rage stinging my eyes. He made sure I couldn't be a real one. He cut my legs off at the starting line and then mocked me for limping. I put the mug down on the patio table with a clatter. I am going to see him. I said, Audrey, don't go over there angry, Renee warned. I am not angry. Mom, I said, walking to the gate, I am enlightened. I didn't go to his house. I went to the firm. It was 8 o'clock at night. But I knew he would be there. He lived in that office. The security guard let me up. My name was apparently now on the approved guest list. The 42nd floor was quiet, the corridors dim, but the light was on in the corner office. I pushed the door open. Graham Carter was sitting at his desk, surrounded by boxes. He wasn't working. He was just sitting there, staring at a framed photograph on his credenza. It was a picture of me, age 7, holding a fish I had caught. He looked up when I entered. He didn't look surprised. Hello? Audrey, why did you kill the clerkship? I asked. No preamble, no greeting. He leaned back in his chair. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Your mother has a big mouth. Don't blame her. I said, own it. You called Holloway. You told him I was unstable. Why? I didn't say unstable, Graham said calmly. I said reactive. And you were? You still are? Look at you now, storming into my office. Because you lied about me, I shouted. You used your influence to block my path. You wanted me to fail. No, he said, his voice rising for the first time. I wanted you to survive. He stood up. He looked smaller than he used to, but the intensity was still there. Holloway destroyed people. Audrey, I saw what he did to his clerks. He broke them. He humiliated them. You were 24. You wore your heart on your sleeve. You took every loss personally. If you had gone into that chambers, he would have crushed the part of you that makes you, you. So you decided for me? I asked. You decided I was too weak? I decided you were too valuable to be wasted on a sadist. He said. I stared at him. He believed it. He actually believed that sabotaging my career was an act of love. He believed that control was the only way to care for someone. And now? I asked quietly, are you trying to protect me now? By asking me to affiliate? Or are you just trying to find a safe place to hide your mistakes? He looked at me. His eyes were tired, infinitely tired. I'm trying to give you the keys. Audrey, I built this engine. It is powerful, but it has a flaw. I can't fix it. I am too part of it. You are outside of it. You can strip it down. You can rebuild it and inherit your fraud. I asked. I know about Northbridge. Dad, I know about the backdating. He didn't flinch. Then you know why I can't fix it, he said. Because you are the one who broke it. I said. He sat back down. He looked at the photo of the 7-year-old girl with the fish. I didn't want you eaten alive. Audrey, he said softly. That is all I ever wanted, to keep you from being eaten. I realized then that he was a man driven by a profound, paralyzing fear. He wasn't the titan I thought he was. He was a father terrified of the world, who had built a fortress to keep the monsters out, only to realize he had locked the monsters in with him. I can't save you. Dad, I said. I know, he said. But maybe you can save the firm. I walked out. I felt hollowed out. The anger had burned down to ash. I understood him now. He didn't hate me. He just didn't know how to love me without controlling me. And now that he had lost control, he was offering me the only thing he had left, his broken empire. I went back to my own office. It was midnight. The arts district was quiet. I let myself in and locked the door behind me. I sat in the dark, watching the streetlights cast long shadows on the floor. Then, the printer in the corner whirred to life. I jumped. It was a networked printer, but no one else was here. A single document began to spit out into the tray, then another, then another. I walked over to it. The pages were warm. I picked them up. Confidential, internal use only. Schedule D. Pending matters and exposure. It had arrived. Someone, Miles, Jessa, maybe even my father himself, had sent it. I carried the stack to my desk and turned on the lamp. I started to read. It was a catalog of disasters. Item 1. Malpractice claim. Estate of J. Reynolds. Potential exposure. $5 million. Item 2. Sanctions motion. Vi. Glowtech Industries. Discovery abuse. Item 3. EEOC. Complaint. Gender discrimination. I turned the page, and there it was. The item I had been dreading. Item 12. Northbridge Aerosystems. Internal review. Chain of custody irregularities regarding safety inspection logs. Potential criminal exposure under federal false statement statute. My finger traced the line. Next to each item was a column for responsible partner. Next to item 12, in bold, black letters, G.C. Graham Carter. He wasn't just aware of it. He was the responsible partner. He was the one who would go to jail if this came out. I felt a wave of cold rush through me. The note fell from my hand. He hadn't applied to my firm because he respected my ethics. He hadn't applied because he wanted to give me the keys. He had applied because I was the only person in the world who might hesitate to turn him in. He was banking on my blood. He was banking on the fact that no matter how much I hated his control, I wouldn't want to see my father in handcuffs. He was using the one thing he had called a weakness, my emotional reactivity, as his last line of defense. He thought I would choose family over truth. I stood up and walked to the window. The city spread out before me, a grid of lights and darkness. I thought about Kira, unable to breathe. I thought about Soren Pike, whose livelihood was at risk. I thought about the 7-year-old girl with the fish, who just wanted her dad to be proud. He was right. I was emotional. I was reactive. But he was wrong about one thing. He thought emotion made me weak. He didn't understand that it was the only thing that gave me the strength to do what I had to do. I wasn't going to hide him. I picked up my phone. I dialed Mara Keene. "It is Audrey," I said into the voicemail. "I have Schedule D. We need to talk." I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair, watching the sun come up over the harbor, turning the gray water to gold. I watched the city wake up, oblivious to the fact that one of its pillars was about to crumble. I knew what the outcome would be. I knew it would destroy the name Carter in this town. But as the light filled the room, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one turning on the lights. The coffee in Mara Keene's office was always served in delicate porcelain cups, the kind that made you feel clumsy if your hands were shaking. My hands were shaking. I put the cup down on the saucer with a rattle that sounded too loud in the quiet room. I am going to destroy him. Mara, I said. The words tasted like ash. It is not just a lawsuit. It is a demolition. If I file this complaint, if I attach Schedule D, Graham Carter will not just lose his license. He will lose his standing. He will be the man who committed fraud and tried to hide it behind his daughter's skirt. Mara sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a silk blouse the color of steel. She didn't look horrified. She looked like a surgeon assessing a necessary amputation. "And if you don't file it?" she asked. "Then I become him." I said, "I become the vault where he keeps his secrets. I become the accomplice." I looked out the window at the brick facades of the historic district. "But the town won't see it that way," I said, my voice dropping. "Harbor Falls is small. They worship the ground Graham walks on. If I do this, I won't be the whistleblower. I will be the vindictive daughter. I will be the girl who couldn't cut it in the big leagues. So she burned down the stadium. They will say I did it out of spite because he blocked my clerkship. They will say I finally got my revenge." Mara leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp behind her glasses. "Audrey, listen to me. You are worried about the label. You are worried about the narrative. I am worried about the truth being twisted until it looks like a temper tantrum." I said. Mara sighed. "The truth is always twisted. That is what we do for a living. We take facts and we build houses out of them. But you are asking the wrong question. You are asking how people will see you. You should be asking how you will see yourself." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "People will label you no matter what," she said quietly. "If you save him, you are a patsy. If you expose him, you are a traitor. There is no version of this story where you walk away with everyone liking you. So choose the label you can live under. Can you live under the label of accomplice?" I thought about Kira Donnelly, shaking in the bookstore. I thought about the forged inspection logs. I thought about the 7-year-old girl holding the fish, waiting for a dad who was too busy building a legacy to notice she was wet and cold. "No," I said, "I can't live with that one." "Then you have your answer," Mara said. "Now go and deliver it." I didn't call for an appointment. I sent a courier packet to Celeste Whitlock with a single page inside. A formal notice of conditional discussion. I set the time for 2 in the afternoon. I set the location, their conference room, not mine. I wanted them on their home turf. I wanted them to feel safe, right up until the moment they weren't. When I walked into the main conference room at Whitlock and Price, the air conditioning was humming its low, expensive note. The view of the harbor was spectacular. A sprawling vista of gray water and industry. Celeste was there. So was Grant Price, the other named partner, a man with a silver mane and a smile that looked like a reflex rather than an emotion. And sitting next to him was Arthur Vance, the head of litigation, 3 sharks in a tank, and me. Graham wasn't there. I hadn't expected him to be. They were keeping him insulated. "Audrey," Grant said, standing up but not offering his hand, "we were surprised by your summons. Usually, the acquired party doesn't set the agenda. I am not the acquired party." "Grant," I said, placing my briefcase on the table. "And this isn't a summons. It is an ultimatum." I sat down. I didn't open my briefcase yet. "We are prepared to move forward with the affiliation," Celeste said, her voice smooth. "We have drafted the letter of intent. It includes the capital infusion we discussed. $2 million into your operating account. Immediate vesting." I ignored the number. It was a bribe, and we both knew it. "I have drafted my own conditions." I said, "If, and that is a massive if, I agree to allow your firm to operate under the Carter Legal Studio banner. The following things will happen first." I listed them, counting them off on my fingers. 1. An independent forensic audit of all discovery practices for the last 5 years, conducted by a firm of my choosing. 2. Full disclosure of all pending matters to every single client currently on your roster. 3. The immediate resignation of any partner found to have touched the Northbridge files. The room went very quiet. Arthur Vance looked at the ceiling. Celeste went still, but it was Grant Price who reacted. He laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. "Excuse me?" Grant said. He leaned over the table, his cufflinks clicking against the wood. "You want us to resign? You want to audit us? I want to know what I'm buying." I said calmly, "You aren't buying anything." Grant sneered. "We are giving you a gift. We are handing you a legacy. We are taking your little storefront practice and turning it into a powerhouse. You should be on your knees thanking us, not dictating terms." There it was. The arrogance, the absolute, unshakable belief that I was lucky to be in the room. "Your little firm," I repeated softly. Grant waved a hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. You handle slip and falls and employment disputes for baristas. We handle the skyline. You don't get to walk in here and demand we open our veins." I looked at Celeste. She wasn't smiling. She was watching me with the wariness of someone who smells gas. I realized then that this was the real reason they had come to me. It wasn't just the clean reputation. It was the assumption of gratitude. They thought I was so desperate for their validation, for my father's validation, that I would take the deal just to feel like a real lawyer. "You are right, Grant," I said. "I do handle disputes for baristas. And do you know what baristas have that you don't?" I paused. "They have clean hands." I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the single sheet of paper I had printed the night before. I slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped in front of Celeste. "What is this?" Grant asked. "Read it," I said. Celeste looked down. I saw her eyes scan the header. Schedule D. Pending matters. I saw her eyes track down the list. I saw the moment she reached item 12. Northbridge Aerosystems. Chain of custody irregularities. And I saw the moment she saw the initials. G. C. Her face went gray. It was instant. The blood simply left her skin. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. Grant snatched the paper from her. He read it. His face flushed a dark, angry red. "This is confidential work product," he sputtered. "This is stolen property. I will have you disbarred. I will have you arrested. You won't do anything." "Grant," I said, my voice hard, "because if you do, I will file this with the Attorney Disciplinary Board within the hour, along with the email chain where you instructed the associates to refresh the file." Grant froze. His mouth opened, then closed. "Who gave it to you?" Celeste asked again. This time her voice was sharper, edged with panic. "Was it Miles? Was it a clerk? It doesn't matter who gave it to me." I said, "I have it, and now I know why you want to affiliate. You aren't restructuring. You are running." I stood up. "My conditions stand. Full audit, full disclosure, resignations, or I walk away, and I take this piece of paper to the authorities. You have 24 hours. I turned to leave. "Audrey." "Wait," Celeste said, standing up. I didn't wait. I walked out of the room, past the reception desk, and into the elevator. My legs felt like water. I leaned against the metal wall as the elevator descended, closing my eyes. I had done it. I had pulled the pin. I went back to my office and waited. I knew the silence wouldn't last. It broke at 9 o'clock that night. The front door of my office chimed. I was sitting at my desk, the only light coming from the desk lamp. I didn't look up. I knew who it was. The heavy, measured tread was unmistakable. I buzzed him in. Graham Carter walked into my office. He wasn't wearing his coat. He was wearing his suit, but the tie was loosened, hanging askew. He was holding his worn leather briefcase in his right hand. He looked like a man who had walked all the way from the tower. He stood in the doorway, looking at the exposed brick walls, the mismatched furniture, the stack of files on my desk. "So this is it," he said. His voice was rough. "This is it," I said. He walked over and sat in the client chair. He put the briefcase on the floor. It hit the wood with a heavy thud, as if it contained lead bars. "Grant says you have Schedule D," he said. "I do." He nodded. He didn't ask who gave it to me. He looked at his hands. "I need to tell you what really happened," he said. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost choked me. Now? I asked, my voice rising. Now you need to tell me? After you tried to trick me into signing a merger? After you tried to make me an accessory to fraud? You want to tell me the truth now because I have a gun to your head? I have been waiting my whole life for you to be honest with me. Dad! I shouted. I wanted honesty when I was 12 and you missed my recital. I wanted honesty when you blocked my clerkship. I didn't want it on your schedule. I wanted it because I was your daughter. He flinched. It was the first time I had ever seen him physically recoil from my words. I know, he said softly. I know. Audrey. He took a breath. It started small. He said, it always starts small. Northbridge. They are our biggest client. They pay the retainer that keeps the lights on. 4 months ago, they got hit with a compliance audit from the Department of Defense. Routine stuff. But then the junior associate, a kid, 26 years old, realized he had lost the physical safety logs for the guidance chips. Lost them? I asked. Misfiled. Shredded. Who knows? They were gone. But we had the digital scans. Or we thought we did. The scans were incomplete. The dates were wrong. So you fixed them. I said. Graham looked at me. No, I didn't fix them. Grant fixed them. He told the associate to reconstruct the timeline based on the client's memory, to refresh the file. And you knew. I said, I was copied on the email. He said, I saw it. And I didn't stop it. Why? Because it was a Friday. He said, a weary smile touching his lips. Because I was tired. Because the client was screaming about the deadline. Because I told myself it was just a procedural fix. That the inspections had actually happened. So the paperwork was just a formality. I rationalized it. And then the Department of Defense investigators asked for the metadata. He said, and suddenly, it wasn't a procedural fix anymore. It was a federal crime. And we were already committed. We had submitted the documents. To retract them would be to admit fraud. So we doubled down. We sealed the case. We took the Greystone loan to pay for the Specialist Defense Counsel. We started digging a hole to hide the body, and the hole just kept getting deeper. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I didn't forge the documents. Audrey, but I am the senior partner on the account. It happened on my watch. If it comes out, I am responsible. And so you applied to me. I said, to hide. No, he said firmly. Then why? Why me? Why not merge with Davis and Clark? Why not dissolve? Why come to the daughter you called a pretend lawyer? Graham leaned forward. Because if it falls, Audrey, it should fall on me, not on the associates, not on the paralegals, and not on you. I don't understand. I said, if we affiliate, he said, speaking quickly now. The plan was to move the operational assets, the staff, the clean clients, the leases, under your entity. Carter Legal Studio becomes the surviving firm. Whitlock and Price remains as a shell, holding the Northbridge liability. When the explosion happens, the shell takes the hit. The partners, me, Grant, Celeste, we go down with the shell, but the firm, the people, they survive. Under you. I stared at him. It sounded noble. It sounded like a captain going down with the ship to save the crew. But there is a catch, isn't there? I asked, because if that was the plan. Why did Celeste tell me I would be the face of the legacy? Why did the agreement have indemnification clauses that transferred liability to me? Graham went still. What indemnification clauses? He asked. Page 52. I said, unilateral indemnity for past acts. He frowned. That shouldn't be there. The draft I saw had a firewall provision. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the binder. I flipped to page 52. I handed it to him. He read it. His eyes narrowed. He read it again. Grant. He whispered. What? Grant and Celeste, he said, his voice hollowing out. They changed it. He looked up at me, and I saw the realization crash into him. They weren't planning to go down with the ship. Audrey, they were planning to jump onto your boat and hand you the anchor. I felt a cold chill. Explain. I said, if this clause is here, Graham said, tapping the page. It means the new entity assumes the liability, if we merged. And the fraud was discovered. Whitlock and Price would claim that the successor firm, your firm, had accepted responsibility for the files during the transition. They were going to frame me? I asked. No, Graham said. Not frame. They were going to use you as the fall guy. They would retire, they would take their buyouts, and disappear to Florida. And when the Department of Defense came knocking, they would find Audrey Carter, managing partner, holding the bag. He put his head in his hands. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear to God. Audrey. I didn't know they changed the draft. I thought I was giving you an asset. They were giving you a death sentence. I watched him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my father was just a tragic figure, a man who had made a mistake and tried to fix it, only to be outmaneuvered by his ruthless partners. But then I looked at the worn briefcase on the floor. I looked at the lines on his face. It didn't matter if he knew. It didn't matter if he was the villain or the fool. The result was the same. He had built a culture where this was possible. He had hired Grant. He had partnered with Celeste. He had created the monster that was now trying to eat his own daughter. He looked up at me. You have Schedule D, he said. I do. And you have the emails? Yes. Then you have the kill shot, he said. He stood up. He picked up his briefcase. Do it, he said. What? File it, Graham said. Don't negotiate with Celeste. Don't ask for audits. They will lie to you. They will stall. They will shred everything before you can get a forensic team in the door. He walked to the door. If you want to be a real lawyer. Audrey, he said, his back to me, then be one. Protect your client. And right now, your client is the truth. He opened the door. Dad, I said. He stopped. If I file this, you go to prison. He didn't turn around. I know, he said. And then he walked out into the dark. I sat there for a long time. The silence in the office was deafening. I thought about the twist. The realization that Celeste and Grant had planned to sacrifice me was horrifying, but it was also clarifying. There was no gray area left. There was no saving the firm. The firm was a criminal enterprise. And my father? I didn't know if his confession was redemption or just the final. Exhausted surrender of a man who was tired of running. Maybe he wanted to be caught. Maybe he wanted me to be the one to catch him because he knew I would do it right. Or maybe, just maybe, he finally respected me enough to let me hold the knife. I looked at the phone. I looked at the computer. I had a choice. I could walk away. I could shred Schedule D and pretend I never saw it. I could let them find another victim. I could let my father fade away into a disgraceful retirement. Or I could do what a real lawyer does. I opened my laptop. I logged into the Attorney Disciplinary Board's secure portal. I started a new complaint form. Complainant, Audrey Carter. Respondent, Whitlock and Price, LLP. Subject, systemic fraud and document tampering. My fingers hovered over the keys. This was it, the moment I became the label Mara warned me about. The daughter who took her father down, the vindictive woman, the traitor. But as I looked at the blinking cursor, I realized Mara was wrong. There was another label, the one who stopped it. I thought about Jessa Marlin. I thought about Kira Donnelly. I thought about the hundreds of people who worked at Northbridge who were trusting their safety to guidance chips that had been certified with lies. I wasn't doing this for my father. I wasn't doing it to hurt him or to save him. I was doing it because the law is not a game. It is not a strategy. It is the line we draw between civilization and chaos. And if I didn't hold that line, then I really was just a pretend lawyer. I began to type, to the disciplinary board. Attached herein is evidence regarding case CV 2025998. I typed through the night. I attached the emails. I attached Schedule D. I attached my own affidavit regarding the affiliation offer and the indemnity clause. When I finished, it was 4 a.m. The city was silent. I moved the mouse to the submit button. I hesitated for 1 second. I saw my father's face. I saw the pride trying to disguise itself as critique. I didn't want you eaten alive. I clicked submit. The screen refreshed. Complaint received. Case number assigned. It was done. I closed the laptop. I put my head down on the cool wood of the desk. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, hollow lightness. The legacy was gone. The dynasty was over. But the truth? The truth was finally on the record. The morning after I filed the complaint, the sun rose over Harbor Falls with a terrifying indifference. The city didn't care that the legal landscape was about to fracture. The baker next door was still kneading dough. The traffic on the bridge was still snarled. But inside my office, the air felt thin, like the moment before a thunderclap. I had spent the early hours with Kira Donnelly and Jessa Marlin. I brought them to my office before the city fully woke up, before the inevitable storm of subpoenas and accusations began. I made them tea, just as my mother would have done, though my hands were far less steady than hers. We need to be clear about one thing, I told them. We sat in a triangle of chairs, away from the windows. I am not your lawyer in this matter because I am also a witness, but I am your shield until the special counsel is appointed. Kira looked pale, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. Are they going to sue us? She asked. They might threaten it. I said, they will try to paint you as disgruntled employees. They will try to say you stole trade secrets, but they won't sue you. Kira, because if they sue you, they have to depose you, and they do not want you under oath in open court. I looked at Jessa. She was watching me with a mixture of fear and awe. You are not weapons, I said firmly. You are not ammunition I am firing at my father's firm. You are people who saw something wrong and refused to look away. That is dignity. Do not let them strip that from you. If the press calls, you say nothing. You direct them to me. We handle this lawfully. We handle this quietly. Jessa nodded. Thank you. Audrey. I watched them leave, 2 young women walking out into the gray morning, carrying the weight of $1 billion secret. They were brave, braver than I had been at their age. I had spent my 20s trying to please the system. They were willing to dismantle it. When the door closed, I was alone again with the reality of what I had done. I had clicked submit. The complaint was in the system. Case number 84229, Carter versus Whitlock and Price. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with finality. It was irreversible. I had pulled the thread that would unravel the tapestry of my father's life. I wasn't doubting the rightness of it. Schedule D was a map of corruption that could not be ignored. But knowing you are right doesn't make the destruction feel good. It just makes it necessary. The response from Whitlock and Price was swift and brutal. At 10 o'clock, a courier arrived. He didn't look like a standard delivery guy. He looked like private security in a windbreaker. He handed me a thick envelope and asked for a signature. I opened it at my desk. It was a cease and desist letter, printed on the heavy, cream-colored bond paper I had grown up admiring. To Audrey Carter. Esquire. Re. Unauthorized possession of privileged material and defamation. The language was violent. They accused me of corporate espionage, theft of proprietary work product, and tortious interference with business relations. They demanded the immediate return of all stolen schedules and a retraction of any statements made to third parties. They threatened a lawsuit for damages in excess of $10 million. I read it twice. My heart hammered against my ribs. A primitive drumbeat of panic. $10 million. They were threatening to bankrupt me, to take my license, to bury me under a mountain of litigation that would last a decade. But then I read the third paragraph. We demand you identify the source of the leaked documents immediately. I smiled. A cold, humorless expression. They didn't know. They didn't know if it was Miles, or Jessa, or a hacker, or Graham himself. The aggression wasn't a show of strength. It was a scream of terror. They were flailing. I put the letter in the evidence file. I didn't reply. By noon, the phone started ringing. It wasn't the press yet. It was my clients. Harbor Falls was a small town masquerading as a city. Rumors move faster than fiber optics. Someone at the courthouse had seen the filing. Someone else had heard about the emergency meeting at Whitlock and Price. I picked up the phone. It was Ben, the landscape architect I had saved from Ridley Development. Audrey? He asked. I heard something crazy at the supply yard. People are saying you are suing your dad's firm? That they are going under? I took a breath. Transparency. That was the only currency I had left. I cannot discuss the details of pending litigation. Ben, I said, but I can tell you that I have filed a complaint regarding ethical violations. There was a silence on the line. I waited for him to fire me. I waited for him to say that he couldn't have a lawyer who was embroiled in a family war, that it was too messy, too risky. So, it is true? He asked. You are taking on the giants? I am doing what the law requires. I said, if you feel uncomfortable, Ben, I can help you transfer your files to another attorney. I would understand. Transfer? Ben laughed. Are you kidding? The guys at the yard are saying you are the only lawyer in town with the guts to stand up to them. I am not going anywhere. You are my lawyer. Audrey. Kick their ass. I hung up, feeling a lump in my throat. The calls continued. A bakery owner, a freelance graphic designer, a widow whose estate I managed. They were confused, yes, but they didn't leave. They stayed. For years, I had thought my clients hired me because I was cheap, because I was the discount option for people who couldn't afford the real lawyers at Whitlock and Price. But as I listened to their voices, I realized I was wrong. They didn't hire me because I was cheap. They hired me because I listened, because I fought for them, because they trusted me. My father had a reputation, but I had a name, and for the first time, I realized that my name carried weight. That evening, I went to my mother's house. I needed to tell her before she saw it on the news. Renee was in the living room, sitting in the dark, watching the television with the sound off. She looked small in the overstuffed armchair. Mom? I said. She turned to me. Her face was streaked with tears. Graham called me. She said. I froze. Of course he did. He told me what you did. She said. He said you filed the complaint. He said the police might come. Not the police. Mom, I said, sitting on the ottoman in front of her. The disciplinary board. It is civil, not criminal. At least, not yet. Why, Audrey? She asked, her voice trembling. Why couldn't you just let it go? Why did you have to be the one? Because he made me the one, I said, the frustration rising. He put my name on the application. He put me in the middle of it. I had to choose between saving him and saving myself. Renee shook her head. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. You are so hard, she whispered. You have always been so hard. Just like him. I felt the sting of it. Hard, unfeeling, the reactive daughter. I am not hard. Mom, I said, I am just standing on my own 2 feet. I built my firm from nothing. I paid my own rent. I didn't take a dime from him. I don't owe him my integrity. Renee looked up at me. Her eyes were sad and infinitely weary. You didn't pay your own rent. Audrey, I stared at her. What? Your first office? She said. The one on Elm Street. The landlord wanted a guarantor because you had no credit history and no assets. You were 3 months out of law school. I remember. I said, I told him I would pay 6 months in advance. He waived the guarantor. Renee shook her head. He didn't waive it. I signed it. The room went silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. You signed it? I asked. I went to his office. Renee said, I told him not to tell you. I signed the guarantee. I put my own savings account up as collateral. If you had failed, I would have lost it. But why? I asked. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed to believe you did it yourself, she said. You needed to believe you didn't need us, your father. He said you would fail. He said you would be back home in 6 months. I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted you to have a chance. I looked at my mother. I had always seen her as weak. I had seen her as the woman who stayed, the woman who absorbed my father's shadows. I had never seen her as the silent investor in my freedom. She had bet on me. When my father was betting against me, she had put her name on the line. Love existed in this house, I realized. It was just buried under layers of silence and fear. It wasn't the loud, proud love I wanted. It was a quiet, desperate love that hid in the background, holding up the walls so I wouldn't get crushed. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. She reached out and touched my face. "He is going to lose everything." "Isn't he?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes." She closed her eyes. "Then I guess I will have to be the strong one now." The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. It was an emergency session of the Harbor Falls Attorney Discipline Board. The speed was unprecedented, but so were the allegations. The hearing room was in the basement of the courthouse. It was a sterile, windowless box with fluorescent lights that hummed like trapped insects. The air smelled of floor wax and nervous sweat. I arrived early. I sat at the complainant's table, alone. My briefcase sat on the table before me, containing the evidence that would end an era. At 8:55, the doors opened. Celeste Whitlock walked in first. She was wearing a white suit, armor for the innocent. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical temperature drop. Behind her was Grant Price, looking flushed and angry, whispering to a team of 3 defense attorneys. And then, Graham Carter walked in. He was alone. He wasn't sitting with his partners. He wasn't sitting with a lawyer. He walked to the respondent's table and sat at the far end, leaving a gap of 3 empty chairs between him and Celeste. He looked tired. His skin had a gray, papery quality, but his eyes were clear. He looked at me, just once, and nodded. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. The panel chair, a retired judge named Harrison, who had known my father for 30 years, called the session to order. He looked uncomfortable. "We are here to review the emergency complaint filed by Ms. Audrey Carter regarding allegations of professional misconduct at the firm of Whitlock and Price," Harrison said. "Given the gravity of the submitted evidence, specifically Schedule D, we have expedited this preliminary review." Celeste's lawyer stood up immediately. "Mr. Chairman," he boomed, "this entire proceeding is a farce. The documents in question were obtained illegally. They are privileged. We move to dismiss and to sanction the complainant for theft." Harrison looked over his glasses. "We will address the admissibility issues in due course, but first, Mr. Chairman." A voice interrupted. It was Graham. He stood up slowly. He held his briefcase with both hands. "I would like to speak," Graham said. The room went silent. Celeste turned to look at him, her eyes widening. Her lawyer tried to intervene. "Mr. Carter, I advise you to—" "Sit down," Graham said. He didn't shout. He just said it with the authority of a man who had commanded courtrooms for 40 years. The lawyer sat. Graham walked to the podium. He placed a single document on the stand. "I am submitting this affidavit to the board," Graham said. His voice was gravelly but steady. "It waives my attorney-client privilege regarding the Northbridge matter." A gasp went through the room. Celeste stood up. "Graham, you can't." "I can," Graham said, not looking at her. "And I have—" He looked at the panel. "This affidavit confirms the authenticity of the documents Miss Carter submitted. It confirms that on October 14th, 2025, the firm of Whitlock and Price knowingly submitted altered evidence to the Department of Defense." He paused. "I did not alter the documents myself, but I was the senior partner. I was informed of the alteration, and I did nothing to stop it. I prioritized the client's timeline over the court's integrity. I failed in my duty." He took a breath, and for the first time, his voice shook. "I also name Grant Price and Celeste Whitlock as the primary architects of the scheme to conceal this fraud through a proposed affiliation with Carter Legal Studio. The intent of that affiliation was to transfer liability to an unknowing third party, specifically, my daughter." He looked at me then. "I was weak," he said. "I was afraid of losing the firm. I was afraid of the shame. But I will not be the man who lets his daughter pay for his sins. I submit my resignation to the bar. Effective immediately." He stepped back from the podium. He wasn't a martyr. He didn't look heroic. He looked like a man who had finally put down a heavy load. He hadn't done it to save the world. He had done it because the lie had become too heavy to carry. He was refusing to lie anymore. I felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't redemption. It was just the truth, and it was enough. But Celeste wasn't done. She stood up. Ignoring her lawyer, she walked to the podium, her white suit gleaming under the lights. She didn't look at Graham. She looked at me. "Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice ice cold. "What we are seeing here is not a confession. It is a family tragedy playing out in public. Graham Carter is a man under immense stress, suffering from cognitive decline. We have medical records to suggest he is not competent. She was eating her own. She was willing to destroy his mind to save her reputation. And as for Ms. Carter," Celeste continued, gesturing at me with a manicured hand, "let us be honest about what this is. This is a personal vendetta. This is a daughter who was rejected by this firm, not once, but repeatedly. She was bitter. She was jealous. When we offered her a generous affiliation, an act of charity, frankly, to help a struggling solo practitioner, she misinterpreted it through the lens of her own insecurity. She leaned into the microphone. She stole these documents. She manipulated a sick old man. She is not a whistleblower. She is a child having a tantrum because her father didn't love her enough." The words hung in the air, toxic and familiar. It was the same weapon they had always used. "You are emotional. You are reactive. You are a child." I stood up. "Ms. Carter?" Chairman Harrison asked. "Do you wish to respond?" I walked to the podium. I stood next to Celeste. I was shorter than her, but I didn't feel small. I felt grounded. I didn't look at my father. I looked at the board. "I am not here to discuss my childhood," I said. My voice was low, but it carried to the back of the room. "And I am not here to discuss the generosity of a firm that borrows money from predatory lenders to hide its insolvency." I turned to Celeste. "You want to talk about emotion. Celeste, you want to frame this as a woman being hysterical? That is the oldest trick in the book. When a woman speaks the truth, you call it emotional. When a woman demands accountability, you call it a vendetta. You count on that label to shame us into silence. You count on us being so afraid of looking crazy that we let you get away with murder." I looked back at the board. My father is not senile. He is guilty, and so am I. I am guilty of believing, for a long time, that power was the same thing as integrity. I am guilty of wanting to be part of that club. But I learned something this week. I picked up Schedule D from the table and held it up. Integrity isn't about being unemotional. It is about what you do when you are terrified. It is about what you do when the people you love are the ones holding the match. I dropped the paper on the podium. The evidence is not hysterical. The timestamps are not emotional. The fraud is a fact, and no amount of gaslighting is going to change that. I am not a child. I am an officer of the court, and I am asking you to do your job. I walked back to my seat. The room was absolutely silent. Celeste looked like she had been slapped. Graham was looking at his hands, but there was the faintest shadow of a smile on his face. The chair cleared his throat. "The board will take this matter under advisement. We are referring the allegations to the State Attorney General's Office for Criminal Investigation. The licenses of all named partners are suspended pending that review. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. People stood up. The noise rushed back in, lawyers whispering, chairs scraping. I packed my briefcase. My hands were steady. I looked up to see Graham standing a few feet away. He was holding his briefcase. He looked at me. He didn't apologize. He didn't say he loved me. We were past that. We were two lawyers who had just argued the case of our lives. He nodded. A slow, solemn movement. I nodded back. He turned and walked out the back door. Toward the holding area where the marshals were waiting to take statements, I turned and walked toward the main exit. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the courthouse hallway. The air was different here. Cooler, freer. A bank of reporters was waiting by the steps. Camera flashes popped like lightning. Microphones were thrust in my direction. "Ms. Carter, is it true your father has resigned? Audrey, did you really sue your own firm? What happens to Whitlock and Price?" My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, a dozen times. Messages from clients, messages from Ben, messages from Kira, messages from strangers who had heard the news. I stopped. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp, gritty air of Harbor Falls. I wasn't Audrey Carter, the daughter of the great Graham Carter. I wasn't the pretend lawyer. I wasn't the victim. I adjusted my coat. I looked at the cameras. I didn't smile, but I didn't look away. I stepped forward into the lights. I was Audrey Carter, the woman who had cleaned house, and for the first time in 33 years, I knew exactly who that was. Thank you for listening to Dad Said You'll Never Be a Real Lawyer. His firm applied to mine. This story was a journey through the dark corridors of family expectation and the hard, bright light of integrity. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice, betrayal, and redemption, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And please, share your thoughts on Audrey's decision in the comments in English. Did she do the right thing? Could you have done it? Until next time, keep your eyes open.